Ladies and gents, if I may. Oh, sorry, you can finish your chats. That was a much more sudden cut-off than I expected. For those of you who I haven't met or haven't seen before, and I'm seeing faces, I know I've seen most of you. I'm Mark from roomsXML. Obviously, very interesting times in travel. I think whilst I have a relatively short history in travel compared to some of you who I know have been involved for decades, I think we're probably going through the biggest change or the biggest evolution since the advent of the internet and people starting to book their own holidays online. It stimulates, this change, uncertainty, anger, and also opportunity. We aim to bring together some people who will give you some answers, allay to ask some questions, and hopefully stimulate a bit of thought and open up some opportunities in your mind and in your businesses as we look forward to the future.
Now, it's interesting because my observation of when industries go through significant change is that that's about the percentage of what goes on. Roughly, within a couple of years, a third of the businesses that were there are no longer there. And roughly 20% of businesses who were there are much bigger and much more successful. So, what I'm going to try and do, not knowing anything about the travel industry, so clean hands, what I'm going to try and do is I'm going to try and say, look, this is what goes on when change happens. Because you're all in the middle of change, whether you like it or not. So, let me go down. And we definitely are a changing industry here. And it's fairly obvious why. We've got a set of legislation that we've all known and loved for a while that's going. And we've got a major player who's in the middle of what I would call a significant reorganisation. Okay? They would call it a strategic change. I would call it a significant reorganisation. So it'll be very interesting to see how that plays out. Okay, I'm not a travel agent. And as I said, that could be good or bad. Yeah. Fortunately, Joe Fekete's coming up and he's going to talk. He knows more about travel than, I could stuff into a couple of encyclopedias. So why am I here? And I guess it's because I can go back up to the clouds. And I think what is needed, completely because I'm talking about it, is how to deal with change and how to deal with strategy in the industry. So, where are we? ATAS. Hello world. Goodness. Well, I'm a consumer of travel and I don't much like the name, I have to say, but that's just me as a consumer. So, I'm sure many people love it, I don't. The legislation is changing though, and that is a significant issue because what we've seen is already what we've seen are press articles, general press articles, where members of the travel community are coming out and saying, I've got the scheme, you'll be okay with us. Yeah? Already seen it in the papers. So even before you've actually got a launch of ATAS and all the things that brings, you've got people manipulating the press, as is always the case in change, and you've got one significant industry player who really is out there working very hard. So under the world of TCF, I would argue, it was like a chessboard where everybody could see the chess pieces moving. Yeah? Now, everybody's got their cards and they hold them like this. Now, no chessboard, chessboard's gone, because TCF's gone. And nobody knows where the pieces are, because everybody's holding them to their chests. Right? So, what chips do you hold? You know your customers, you know your opposition, you know how to get business, particularly by word of mouth. I think you guys do a wonderful job of that. But we did a little survey in roomsXML and we found that there were no great signs of alarm amongst travel agents. 2/3 expected not to change at all, which worries me quite a bit. Concern regarding ATAS and think it favours the big end of town, and a real lack of understanding about some key issues where there has been some information come out, particularly about insurance, fit and proper, what ATAS covers and mechanisms for complaints. The good news is, in coming weeks, we will have people who will come in and tell you about accounting and IT and marketing and how these things play in to all of these changes. But before we do that, we have to introduce Joe, who's our resident font of knowledge when it comes to the travel industry. And so I'm going to hand over seamlessly to Joe.
Everything about travel. I know how to travel. I love travel. I've been in travel for a very long time. But over the last few months since this has all started, I've got very involved in what's happening and where it's going, mainly because my wife owns a travel agency. And I, being a finance and business guy, I don't want to see my wife's business go down, so I want to understand how this is all going to affect them. And being an independent, it's a lot different to the conglomerates or people who are part of groups or being a flighty or whatever. So it's more about, so this presentation is more about what independents have to be. That's just a disclaimer, just to say that everything you hear me say today is all just information that I've collected off everybody, all different parties, including, sitting with Gary from ATAS and all the other people who are putting information together, just to understand how it's all coming together. This is a caption that I took off because this is what we used to have, the caption, without being an AFT travel agent, you're on your own. Well, unfortunately, that's all gone, as we know, so we now are on our own. So I won't go too much through that because we all know what we used to have, how the TCF was, how it was all structured, and so on and so on. So I don't really need to go. But from July 1, this is where it all really starts. So there's no federal government TCF, there's no customer compensation fund, there's no licensing. That's a given. It's a voluntary system to move to the ATAS. So it's all voluntary. You don't have to do it. You can just go out on your own. You can get your own insurance. And if you're comfortable with your customer base to do that, and you're not going to lose it because of relevant hedging within the market, people moving to where they think is a safer spot, then you can do that. We are moving to what I call a duopoly system, like the Coles Woolies system. So when all that was deregulated, they came out and took over a lot more of the market, and then you had all the other players coming along, joining into groups to try and control the other bits that they can control. And that's what's going to happen. So end supplier insurance will be the responsibility of travel agents. That also will be voluntary, and obviously not everyone will be able to take that up because there's a cost to all of this, and not all travel agents are going to be able to take it up. If they do take it up, then the question becomes, can you pass it on? Not all travel agents think that they can pass it on because with the internet and all the other different things going on, you'll have a customer saying, well, I'm not going to pay an extra $20 for your admin when I can buy the thing on the internet, or I can get it from someone else who's not going to charge me. Same thing with insolvency insurance to protect your business so the customer's protected. That is another requirement that's going to be required. So from an ATAS point of view, what is it that you have to do to become an ATAS member? Well, you have to be a legal entity, or if you're a sole trader, you have to be part of a group so that the function goes up. You have to have an established code of conduct, which is really just a manual stating, it's just a business manual stating exactly how you're going to run your business. And that has to be ticked off. You're complying with Australian consumer law, well, everybody does. There's a document that's ready available that says how you're supposed to comply with consumer law. You can't do false advertising and all those sorts of things. So everybody does that anyway. So that's a third thing. The end user and supplier insurance, whilst it's not a requirement, they will want you to have that because that's how you protect your customer. And also having insolvency insurance as well, because that's how the customer is protected again as well. So if you go bust, then insurance pays the customer all their money back. As we talked about before, adequate staff training, and then dispute policy. Now that dispute policy is not just about if you've got a dispute with your customer, it's about dispute in your office. So I just did some base sums on what you can expect going forward. It's not exactly right, but it just gives you a guide on how this is going to play out over the next 3 years. So obviously in the first year, you're not going to have any registration. You're going to save on your TCF fee, which is roughly $450 or $500, or depending on what grade you are within that. Most firms, well, they're audited, and obviously it can be anywhere between $3,000 and $5,000. Like for ours, it was $4,000, so that's why I've got that figure there. The extra cost for third-party insurance that you're going to have, which is your end insurance, and then you might have some compliance costs. Now, I'll come to that later because I had a discussion with Gary yesterday about how is this compliance going to happen. So that's where that's going to come from. And obviously there's no more TCF bond or money you have to have on deposits to cover your customer funding. So look, in the first year, you'll probably save a couple of grand. In the second year, your costs will increase because they're going to pull in a registration fee. Now, the registration fee is going to be around $2 grand. The only way, because what we have to look at is that the reason I come up with $2 grand is that the registration fee funds ATAS. So they have to have so much money coming in to be able to fund them. So depending on how many people are in ATAS, is how much money goes in to be able to fund ATAS. Insurances, I was told yesterday that there's been some numbers done. I wasn't told how big the agencies were that they did the numbers on, but the insurance was going to be around $3 grand. Now, that's quite high, and I'll talk about, that's just one insurance company. Now, I'm talking to other insurance companies trying to get them into the market so that we can get competition, and thereby that'll drive insurance prices down. Because the idea would be that if you're going to take up your third-party end supplier insurance and your insolvency insurance, you then bundle your business insurance with it, and it becomes a much cheaper model for the insurance company to take over. So in year two, it'll get to a stage where you're probably going to, in year two, take up all of your savings in year one. That's probably going to be the way it's going to look. So over 2 years, it'll cost you no more than where you were before. But it's really after that. Sorry?
But then your third year will start costing.
Then from then on, thereafter, year on year, your costs are going to increase. Because, as we all know, you look at your home insurance and all these other different things. As years go on, all of a sudden your home insurance goes up another $100, goes up another $150. This, that, and the other. Same with ATAS fees. It'll go up another 10% because costs increase. But ATAS's answer to all of this is you can pass it on to your customers as a surcharge. And the larger companies, being the Flighties and the Hello Worlds of this world, they can save money on bundling all of their agencies and all of their costs, and therefore the cost per travel for them is nowhere near the cost per travel for your independent agencies. So this is a problem for you. You've got to go back to your business model. You've got to look at your business, because now your business is going to change as an independent, because all of a sudden going forward you're going to have to think about, well, you've got more legal implications because now you've got to take care of the customer, you've got to have all these insurances in place, you've got human resources and different accounting policies that you might have to take up. Obviously there's the annual review that you have to comply with ATAS, so therefore that might give you a compliance issue. So therefore there might be, when you talk to ATAS, they'll say, show me that you're compliant. Well, they only have 2 or 3 people on their payroll. There's thousands of agents in Australia. They're not going to be able to go through all your documentation. So therefore they'll be after an independent consultant person who will review your compliance documentation, and then that person will sign off and say, yes, that agency complies. Now that will come at a cost, because having a consultant come in might cost you $500,000, depending on what it is that how big your business is and what needs to be reviewed. If you have everything in place the way it should be, then it won't cost a lot of money. But if you're a little bit disorganised within your agency and the documentation isn't correct, and how secure is your customer base? Now, we were talking before about the duopoly and how those two guys are going to be the 20% of the market that's going to grow to try and be 45% of the market, and then to take it all off everyone else. So, how good's your customer model? How frigid are they? What's your mix between corporate leisure and your walk-in trade? Because you might find that a portion of your walk-in trade will walk into other people because they feel more comfortable, more safer, all of the rest. So, where the independents are stronger is being able to offer a larger service base of different suppliers, different things that they offer to their customer about what the customer can be doing, instead of just always going on that cruise that goes, through to Fiji or something,
More creativeness.
Correct. The other thing you've got to look at is your banking arrangements. Because part of the level of risk for an insurer is how much money they have to pay out. So it comes down to how much of your customer's money you're paying on credit cards. Because using credit cards, if it defaults, you can always get your money back. So therefore your level of risk is smaller from an insurance point of view. So by pushing more and more, by paying more and more of your accounts on credit card, your end supplier's accounts on credit card, will mean your level of risk is lower. Are you part of IATA? Because if you're still part of IATA, as some wholesalers are, you will still, at this point of time, they're still reviewing what they consider, what they want as a group, but I would think they'll still want the accounts audited and various bonding and all that sort of stuff still in play. Insurances, started talking about that before. As a business, whether, you've got to think about your directors, the owners of the business, who might not be within the business and you're just a manager, that they should have directors and officers insurance, things in place where they won't be chased after, for the money that's been lost. Make sure you've got insolvency insurance, and obviously the end supplier insurance is very important. Because currently market sensitive, because of obviously all the advertising and people, what they're going to be doing. It's going to become a customer focus, and as I said before, competitors are starting to use this as an advantage. As we saw, the travel counsellors did the advertising in Travel Daily. Flight Centre are going to put out something that your money's protected. We're an ASX listed company. It's not given what they're saying yet, but that's sort of what I've heard. Now, I just put this together just as a summary, just so that we can understand about what all of the different factors that affect you as a travel agent and whether or not you're going to become an ATAS member and what's going to drive all of this. Obviously there's going to be competition, so that's going to drive your travel industry and decisions you make. There's going to be insurance, so you've got to give the customer comfort, and you'll have legal obligations. Under the insurance, well, we know that ATAS is currently working on with PPL to have the insurance in place. Now, I was talking to Gary yesterday, that insurance they should have documentation out by the end of November for that one.
What I said at the front, Remember what I said about a chessboard and now the poker hand, Remember what I said about a third of the participants in the industry falling out of the industry when there's major change. I think you'd have to say that what Joe's outlined there is major change, whichever way you want to go about it. So if it's a time for a changing environment, it's also a time for you to change as well. I would argue, there at least you've got to review what you've got, and to do that you need a plan. And some of the things that Joe talked about are on this slide here as well. They're about brand and your staff. Are your best staff trained? And, Joe, have they got contracts? Question I always ask as a company director, do you need your worst performing staff member? Your pitch. Joe talked about that, he talked about your pitch. If you're going to have additional costs, what are you going to do? Are you going to sell them? Are you going to price them? I don't know. It's your business. What's your point of difference? Right? Are you going to price or not price? What's your decision going to be on some of this stuff? So, if you've got a decision to make, it always helps to have an action plan, I find. Because unless something's written down, you know, there's a horrible habit of not happening. And business planning for me shouldn't actually be that hard. A business plan should be a couple of pages. We all have that thing that's just out of reach that we could be if we really strove towards it and put some energy towards it. What is it? The more strengths you've got, the better off you are. Whenever there's change, there's opportunity. We've all got weaknesses in our business. Everybody has got a weakness in their business. What are they? Say the things you're no good at and own them in the same way that you own your strengths. We're so bad at actually saying what we're not so good at. Right? But it's actually really liberating if you know them and you speak them. The major threat to my business is, you know, that actually may have changed in the last little while, or it may not have. But what's the major threat? How could I reduce the threat? How could I reduce the size of that? What could I do in my business? Because I take your point. Most of the people here in the room have got their own businesses. You should be pretty mobile. You know, you should have the ability to take decisions far quicker than those big companies. I will commit to learn more because you have to. You have to. You've just got to. What they say about writers is they should read 100 words for every one word that they write. What I would argue in strategy is you've got to listen and you've got to talk to people and you've got to work out where things are going. If you don't do that, then you just don't have the information. So, change. It's necessary, but it's also very difficult. Because not all your staff or customers may like it, particularly when you go back and sack your worst performing staff member. But this is the time for change. You've just heard from Joe, 8, 9 things changing. Think about what a sustainable business will be for you and your agency in 2 or 3 years. That's all, 2 or 3 years. Have a plan. You don't have to follow mine. Have a plan. A simple plan. A 2 or 3 page plan. Nothing too complicated. A simple plan of what you're going to do, because nobody gets successful through accidental, well, maybe some people do, but it's in the minority. Most people who are successful plan to get there. And they don't over-plan, but they plan. And when there's change, you don't have a choice. Thank you.